After releasing my full movie breakdown for The Batman, there were still many things to discuss surrounding the plot events and teases in this new take on Gotham that director Matt Reeves has brought to the big screen. From the big villain cameo to potential teases of other villains in sequels, to where the current main characters are left in this first film, I'm going to be answering some of the biggest questions from The Batman in the aim to extend our knowledge and add to the conversation of this epic comic book film. This analysis will also contain spoilers, so if you do happen to be someone who hasn't seen the film yet, then I would recommend watching this video after you've seen it. Also, a lot of things I discuss continue or build on what I explained in my full movie breakdown the other day, so I would definitely suggest checking that video out first, which will be linked in the description below. But if you want to keep up to date on any of my future content on The Batman, then don't forget to support this video by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. Also, feel free to check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram at Cortex Videos, which is all linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's dive into some of the biggest questions from The Batman Explained. So with many fans watching The Batman in its opening weekend, many have come out of the film with questions surrounding some of the events and wondering what the teases could mean for the future. Maybe some of these are just Easter eggs or loose ends, but based on how they were introduced and tackled, I'd put my money on at least some of them being addressed in future movies or spin-off shows. While The Batman was a detective thriller that wrapped up most of its main plot lines by the concluding act, we were still left with some big questions, especially with those that relate to the history of the comics, so it's time to address some of these and do some detective work surrounding what they could actually mean and the likely answers for each of them. Starting with the first big question, one of the things we see occur towards the final act of The Batman, and in particular the moment where the Caped Crusader is on the brink of being killed by one of Riddler's goons at Gotham Square Garden, there comes a point where our protagonist uses a special kind of green liquid, a performance-enhancing drug if you will. But what is this fluid, as leading up to that moment, the film never really touches upon Batman carrying these, and we are left to wonder what it could be. Of course, this is mainly tied to being a sort of adrenaline that allows the Caped Crusader to have one big final burst to stop the last goon. It's quite comic booky in that regard, and I think that's why it has a lot of people theorizing that it could be something else. And that something else could connect more to the DC universe, as for instance, Bane's green venom is a kind of steroid that makes the villain have the super strength we know. Maybe they are planting the seed for a villain like Bane to come down the line, and maybe he's formed through this venom that Batman used at the end of the film. Or maybe it's just another one of the Dark Knight's tools as a final option to turn to. Like I say, it did seem very fictional, and it would be a way of bringing in a character like Bane down the line, but really that's all we have to go on surrounding that question. Especially if we consider how much villains Batman has, and that any of them could be brought into the spotlight come the sequels. And speaking of that extended rogues gallery, it's not just Bane that could have been referenced in this film, because another reference seems to have gone under the radar for a lot of viewers, and understandably so. And I'm speaking of an Easter egg surrounding the villain Hush that was showcased during one of the Riddler's many news reports. During a scene in the film, it's revealed to us that Edward Elliot, a Gotham City journalist, was investigating Thomas Wayne for his connection to Carmine Falcone, and it turns out that he was the reporter shot dead by the mob boss. Why is this significant to the character Hush? Well, the name Elliot relates to the surname of Thomas Elliot, who turns out to be Hush. And in the comics, Edward Elliot is the great-great-grandfather of Thomas, known as being one of the men responsible for the construction of this modern-day Gotham. So with the first film being highly connected to the history of Gotham's corruption, and one of the big plot reveals focusing on the death of a reporter that Bruce at first thinks his father was solely part of, that would mean an introduction of Hush in a sequel, a character who would want revenge, would be fitting in the current detective storyline. And not to mention that in the comics, Elliot would eventually make his return to Gotham following an encounter with the Riddler. He began planning his revenge on Bruce by manipulating other villains. So could this be a prime way to introduce Hush, and especially considering that this version of Batman is a very detective-inspired one? Well, I think it would, and it would make for a compelling next step of this story, continuing to build on the history of the Waynes and Gotham. Things could only get deeper and extended to maybe even The Court of Owls come a third movie to round out a detective trilogy with these kind of villains. It would make for new villains in live-action films, but also connect to Hush using the iconic villains most people know of. Hush is also the perfect reverse of Batman, and it would continue the theme of villains that are an intellectual and emotional challenge for him. And not to mention that Hush would be quite the physical challenge too. But whether or not this tease was just an Easter egg or is actually used in a future movie, it's clear that if there's one villain in Gotham that feels right to be brought into Matt Reeves' universe, then it's totally Hush. Reeves also talked about the character in an interview saying, "I think Hush is a really interesting one to do. That doesn't mean that the next one will be Hush, I just want to say there are so many interesting characters." And what would we do next? What we're going to do next if we have the opportunity? It's still in the planning stages, and I have a lot of ideas. So please don't latch onto this and say, hey, they're going to do the Hush movie. So clearly, Reeves hasn't fully decided on Hush or any villain yet, but it seems he would definitely be a candidate within this ever-growing story, and Reeves definitely considers him as an interesting candidate. But then again, he did speak to a similar regard on Mr. Freeze, so it really could be anyone. But coming to a character who is most likely going to be a part of the sequels, it's time to discuss the reveal of Barry Keoghan's Joker and what kind of version we could be getting. Now, I am going to be discussing the Joker more in a Batman 2 predictions video in the coming days, but there are some things that we can discuss about this new potential clown prince of crime. So, at the end of The Batman, Edward Nashton meets a new friend in the cells of Arkham Asylum, and it's someone we all expected. The Joker is briefly shown behind the window of his cell door, and it raises some big questions surrounding his future role. Is this Joker already established, and has he already carried out brutal crimes that led him to being put in the asylum? Has Batman already come in contact with this character beforehand? Well, according to Matt Reeves in a recent interview, there was originally going to be another scene with the Joker in this first Batman film, and it's one that, based on leaks, was actually shown to some test audiences. He does confirm that this scene will be shown at some point, and I'm guessing it will most likely be seen on the home entertainment release of the film. The scene included Batman visiting the Joker in jail because he wants advice from a known killer on how to catch the Riddler. Obviously, this scene missed the final cut, and it's understandable that Reeves wanted to use the scene in the film as more of a tease of what's to come. And according to the filmmaker, the Joker that we do see in this film is not fully the clown prince of crime we know him to be yet. Like the other Year One influences on the other characters, that Joker is still forming, and the villain we know and love will most likely be built as the story progresses. Reeves also said that he's not even sure that the second film will feature the Joker. So this will most likely act as the first seed of a long build-up to when we do eventually get the true Joker. We know he's eventually coming back and will break out of Arkham at some point, and maybe we'll even get an appearance by him in that Arkham Asylum HBO Max show that was announced the other day. Reeves also added to his description of this Joker that he is someone who from birth has a permanent smile, something you can just about see if you look very closely in that scene, and it's heavily inspired by The Man Who Laughs, the original inspiration for the character of the Joker. So whenever we do get him, I'm sure we will be getting a much more formed version of that character, or at least see him become the version we know. And based on that description, it sure does make this interpretation seem like it's going to be a pretty terrifying one once fully realised. What we do know from all of these endings too is that the Batman sequel and beyond are really going to be exploring a lot of the Batman's rogue gallery, who will eventually come into the foreground, so expect even more introspection surrounding Bruce Wayne and deeper psychological dives into some of his greatest villains like the Joker. But with the villains out of the way, it's now time to come to some of the other smaller questions that the Batman left us with. One that I think a lot of people had surrounding the central story and relations to that was, who really killed Bruce Wayne's parents? Towards the end of the film, Batman is given conflicting information by both Alfred and Falcone about who really was the killer. Falcone suggests to him that rival crime boss Sal Maroni ordered a hit on the Waynes, whereas in the hospital scene with Alfred, his butler tells him that it was actually Falcone who was responsible, unless it was just a random individual who carried out the crime. Both of them aren't fully certain, and it leaves Bruce without an answer to the question that has fueled his trauma and pain, leading him to ultimately becoming a vigilante of vengeance. Obviously, there's all different interpretations of the Wayne's death in other live-action adaptations and comics, so there can always be a differing answer to this. Or maybe this is part of the genius of Matt Reeves to not have an answer to that very question. It is the lingering trauma for Bruce that led him into becoming what we saw at the beginning of this film, and by not having an answer, maybe it works as an agonizing part of his character to which there is no definitive answer. Something he'll have to overcome and move on from. We'll have to see, and this could always be answered as a shock twist in a future movie, and while we presume it could have been Falcone, the fact that it wasn't answered in this movie, and with Falcone also dying, it suggests to me that if anything, it would have been someone else. The question that remains is whether it's just being used as a form of long-term tragedy, or whether it will come back to be an integral element of a future Batman film. Only time will tell, but I am really interested to hear your particular thoughts on this question. Moving on, a little Easter egg that I wanted to add into this video relates to the opening moment of the Batman's detective story, one where the Riddler murders Gotham's mayor, Don Mitchell. This of course develops as the Riddler's games progress, and Batman relates and learns more about the role his parents played in Gotham's corruption. But a few moments that really resonate with him are the scenes where he looks on at the mayor's son, a boy who is also left without a father. We see it soon after the opening scene, we then see it at the funeral scene, and it's really just a few of the times that Bruce understands the feeling that this child is going through. By putting a surprising emphasis on the mayor's son, including when Bruce further saves him from being hit by a car, and then also at the very end when the boy appreciates Batman's actions during the flooding, are we seeing the beginning of a Robin in this Batman universe? Now, this might be reaching, but I can understand why some fans may be feeling this way, and it's something that was definitely going through my mind while watching the film. We don't get a name for the mayor's son, and this could ultimately lead to him being known as Dick, Jason, Tim, or Damian, as he is in the comics. Also, during that opening creepy scene with the Riddler spying in on the mayor, when the mayor's son is first seen, he's wearing a red ninja costume for Halloween and playing with a sword. Robin's costume is of course primarily red, which could be the first of many hints towards that being the case. And don't forget that during a Q&A of the critics screening in LA, Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves commented on the possibility of seeing a younger Robin, saying that they'd love to do it justice. It could just be them finding an answer to that question, or stating that they love the character, but it also could be a way to launch things off with a Robin in the sequels too. It would also link perfectly into the central orphan themes from this first movie, acting as a form of Robin's long-lasting pain after the death of his father. It's another case of waiting and seeing what Reeves does, but there's always the possibility. But coming now to the final question, what will happen next to certain characters from this first film, and in particular, will Catwoman and the Penguin be a part of the Batman 2? At the end of the Batman, there's the small hint that Batman has never really been able to resist the charms of Selina Kyle's Catwoman, and she's definitely one of his few weaknesses in that regard. The romance and teases between them became one of the film's biggest assets, and it gets us wondering whether we'll see a continuation of that. The Batman seems to have at least answered half of this question using its closing cinematography, with a parting shot of Batman and Catwoman riding their motorcycles in eventually differing directions. Catwoman is off to Bloodhaven, and Batman is staying in Gotham to hopefully become the hero it deserves. Of course, this scene leaves things open for Selina Kyle to return in a future movie, and maybe what we are looking at here is a character that is on the road to becoming an evolved Catwoman. Right now, she wants to get out of Gotham and wants Bruce to come with her. This was never going to happen because Bruce is committed to making Gotham a brighter place. It'll be interesting to see whether Catwoman does eventually come back, and also when we will see her. I think Reeves might take a similar route to what he might do with the Joker, in that she'll come back, but maybe in a third movie. He could be using this as a time gap for Catwoman to grow into the Catwoman we know with a new suit, and they might even take a similar route to Penguin of giving her a spin-off show to fill in the gaps at Bloodhaven. It's again unclear, but it's something that has us thinking about the future of this character, who was great in this first film. And in the mention of Penguin, he's another character who is on the path to becoming the version of the character we know as time goes on. His part in the Batman story becomes more vital once Falcone dies, and it possibly leaves him in control of the Iceberg Lounge and a whole new wave of crime in Gotham City. Batman literally narrates this kind of idea to a concluding shot of the Penguin at the end of the film, and it seems that he will be an integral villain going forward. Whether that's in his own spin-off show or in a Batman sequel, well, we'll have to see. But what we do know is that all of the damage done by the Gotham floods leaves Batman, Gordon, and the GCPD with a lot of problems when it comes to patrolling certain areas of the city. The Penguin is frustrated for much of the film because he knows that he can become so much more than Falcone ever was, and this will likely play out in the future. We'll have to see how Matt Reeves addresses some of these things in future movies, but right now, it has got us all talking about what he could potentially do. But that was my video discussing some of the biggest questions from the Batman. It'll be interesting to see how some of the things mentioned will transpire in the next films, and I'm looking forward to seeing where Matt Reeves' vision will ultimately go. Also, I'm sure there will be many other things that pop up on rewatch from this film, and other examples which you guys may have picked out, so don't forget to let me know down below in the comments section. For more breakdown videos on Matt Reeves The Batman, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.